Hello everyone, my name is Ritika. Welcome to my channel and I'll be discussing about OSI model. So what is an OSI model? OSI model stands for Open System Interconnection Model, which was adopted by ISO in 1984. OSI model has 7 layers which describes how two computers can communicate in a network. So there comes a question, how can two computers communicate in a network? So let us see. So there are 7 layers: application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and physical layer. So we'll be discussing about each of these layers later. First, let us see when the data is transmitted from one computer system, it goes through the application layer, presentation layer, and all the layers to the physical layer via cable physical link that transmits. It contains various transmission medias and then connect which is connected to the computer another computer system's physical layer. See the 7 layers of OSI model. The first 3 layers, physical layer, data link layer, and network layer, are the hardware layers which deals with hardware. Session layer, presentation layer, and application layer are software based. So first 3 layers are known as hardware layers because it deals with the MAC address, the IP address, and everything related to the hardware of a system. Session layer, presentation, and application layer are totally software based. So what about transport layer? It is the layer which connects network layer and the session layer. Let us see all of them in detail. First, physical layer. Physical layer is the primary or the first layer of an OSI model. This layer has everything to do with the transmission media. Like when two systems are to be connected together, it needs a transmission media to communicate or to connect. So let us see diagrammatically the physical layer. When the data comes from data link layer, in the physical layer the data is in the bits format, in the binary format, and then through the transmission media it is connected to the physical layer of another system. So in physical layer the data is transferred in bits. When the data enters into data link layer, basically it is the second layer of OSI model. The bits are converted into frames. 1500 bits consist of a frame. The data link layer compares the MAC address of two systems, like from which the data is being transmitted and where it is received, on which MAC address it is being received, and from which MAC address it is sent. It is checked in the data link layer. Now the network layer. The frames are examined whether they have reached the final destination or not. It means when the message has been sent from one computer to the another, the destination address of the message is correct or not. It is being checked in network layer. So when the destination address has been checked by the network layer, it is then further transferred to the transport layer. Well, when the data comes from data link layer to the network layer, the data from frames are converted to the packets, and the data in network layer is always in packets format. So from in the sender's side, when the data comes from the transport layer to the network layer and then to other layer, the data link layer and then physical layer. In the receiver side, it comes from the data link layer to the network layer and then goes to the transport layer. The data is transferred to the transport layer from the network layer. The packets are transferred into segments. All these segments are numbered. If there is a missing packet, then there is a TCP protocol. There are many protocols like UDP, TCP, SPX, etc. So for example, if there is a missing packet, there is a TCP protocol which requests the packet again, the missing packet. So let us see the diagram of this layer. In this, the data comes from the session layer to the transport layer and then head towards the network layer, and vice versa to the receiver side. So it also controls the flow of the data, and it has end-to-end encryption. That means the data packets flowing over the layers is all in encrypted form. From the physical layer to the application layer, it is in encrypted form. When the data is transferred from transport layer to the session layer, which is the fifth layer of OSI model, it is responsible for the synchronization and termination of the session. A session is created from the from the session layer of a sender side to the session layer of receiver side to know that the second user exists. So in this diagram you can see the session layer, the data coming from the presentation layer through the session layer and then transported to the transport layer from the sender side and receiver side, vice versa. So this was all about session layer. Once the data is sent from the session layer to the presentation layer, the data is again converted into bits format as it was in physical layer. And then in this presentation layer, a file type of the data is identified. Like suppose a file is of .txt extension, so it is identified in the presentation layer. So this layer is used to translate, encrypt and compress the data also. And then the data then let us see the diagrammatic representation of this layer. So here the data is transferred from the application layer to the presentation layer and then from presentation layer to the session layer in the sender side and vice versa on the receiver side. Now there comes the application layer, which is the topmost layer of the OSI model, in which the user directly interacts with the software. It uses many of the protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, SMTP and etc. So in this layer you can finally see the message or receive the message finally on your monitor. So this was all about OSI model, 7 layers of OSI model. Now let us quickly recap the summary of all these things. First, in the physical layer, the message is received by the transmission media. Then in the data link layer, the bits are converted into frames. Then in the network layer, the IP address of the sender and the receiver is checked. Then the data goes to transport layer where the port number is identified and is converted to segments. The data is converted into segments. Then in the session layer, a session is created or terminated. Then in the presentation layer, the data is translated, encrypted and compressed. And then in the application layer, which is the topmost layer, in this layer we can see the data, receive the data where the user can communicate directly with the software. Now let us see the PDU of an OSI model, which is protocol data unit, which tells in each of the layer in which format the data is transferred. So here we can see is in physical layer the data is transferred in bits, data link layer it is transferred in frames. Then from the frames, when when the message goes in network layer, it is transferred into from frames to packets. Then in transport layer it is converted into segments, and when it goes above the transport layer, which is session layer, presentation and application layer, in that the message is transferred in converted into data packets. So this is all about PDU, which is protocol data unit, which is an important topic to learn in OSI model. Well, so this was all about OSI model and 7 layers of an OSI model. So thank you for watching.